If you've been part of a church for longer than, about 5 minutes, you know that we mark important occasions with religious ceremonies. Recently, in our church, we celebrated the ordination and installation of officers during worship. We mark weddings and baptism in the church during religious ceremonies. Last fall, we marked the 150th anniversary of our church's founding, and we did it in worship. The same thing happens when we build new buildings for the church, and especially when we build new sanctuaries. Our congregation had a grand celebration in April of 1950 when we moved into our present sanctuary. We mark these occasions because even though buildings are just buildings, they mean something important to us. In today's episode, the former exiles dedicate the newly rebuilt walls of Jerusalem, and it will seem thoroughly modern. Hello, I'm Stuart Baskin, pastor of First Presbyterian Church of Tyler, Texas, and this is your daily devotional for Tuesday, January 25th, 2022. If you've been following along with these devotionals throughout January, you know that I'm focusing on a couple of the more obscure books of the Bible, Ezra and Nehemiah. I call them obscure only because most of us never read them or even really know what's in them. These two books, which were apparently one longer book at some point in the distant past, tell the story of the return of those children of Israel who had been sent into exile when Israel had been defeated by the Babylonian Empire. According to Ezra and Nehemiah, the books, the returning exiles worked over a period of years on three major tasks: rebuilding Jerusalem and especially its wall, rebuilding the temple which the Babylonians had looted and destroyed, and rebuilding themselves as a people. What we'll find in today's reading is that these three things really overlapped. Here's how this story begins. Now, at the dedication of the wall of Jerusalem, they sought out the Levites in all their places to bring them to Jerusalem to celebrate the dedication with rejoicing, with thanksgivings and with singing, with cymbals, harps, and lyres. It's a celebration. People gather from all the surrounding towns to celebrate this momentous event. One of the most interesting things about the celebration is the way Nehemiah organized it. It seems he took leaders and people on top of the newly rebuilt walls. Walls of cities in those days weren't like walls around our yards or gardens. They would have been designed for guards to walk on from one guard tower to the next, so that someone could theoretically walk on top of the entire wall around the city. So, for the dedication ceremony, Nehemiah divided the group of people who were there to celebrate into two groups. One group walked around the top of the wall clockwise, and the other group counterclockwise, and they met in roughly the center on the opposite side. All the while, musicians played tunes. It would have been a real spectacle. Next, they apparently came down off the wall to offer sacrifices. Don't know if it was in the temple or simply out in the open. Nehemiah reports, they offered great sacrifices that day and rejoiced, for God had made them rejoice with great joy. The women and children also rejoiced. The joy of Jerusalem was heard far away. Now Nehemiah reports what happens next. On that day, men were appointed over the chambers for the stores, the contributions, the firstfruits, and the tithes, to gather into them the portions required by the law for the priests and for the Levites, from the fields belonging to the towns. For Judah rejoiced over the priests and the Levites who ministered. They performed the service of their God and the service of purification, as did the singers and the gatekeepers, according to the command of David and his son Solomon. What a mundane set of details to report. No mention of any of the prayers or speeches that were undoubtedly offered that day. No mention of the songs they sang or the lyrics. No mention of the liturgy that was used or any of the words spoken by the people. Just a mention of the appointment of people to perform the routine duties related to preparing for worship in the temple. It would be as if I gave an account of the celebration of a new sanctuary, and instead of talking about the celebration itself, the hymns we sang, I described the organization of the storage rooms, the rooms where we would store paraments and communion ware. Obviously, Nehemiah thought these details were important. Why? Well, while I cannot read Nehemiah's mind or ask him directly, I suspect that this was part of the rebuilding of themselves as a people. There were certain duties that had to be taken care of to make sure worship could happen on a regular basis. There had to be food for the priests and the Levites. There had to be all of the other stores ready to go. Nehemiah wants us to know that they took these details seriously because they spoke to their intention to honor the covenant relationship they had with God. It may seem mundane, but sometimes we can really find out what's important by looking at the nittiest of grittiest of details. Oftentimes, those details will tell you all you need to know. Tomorrow, Nehemiah goes away, and when he comes back, he finds that everything is not as he left it. But for now, may God continue to bless you and keep you in all that you do this day and in all the days ahead.